we've set out to try and do. These are the 5 objectives we've agreed, which the board has agreed for the MPA. So these are the things we've sort of committed to do, and that I suppose we're setting this group up to try and help deliver. But there is a focus on common mechanisms. So the data and how we view the data and report is clearly really important. Getting a better body of evidence based on real case examples of what's worked and what's worked well, how organisations have really shifted the dial in their workforces, and out of that developing a framework so that we can develop a much more inclusive and diverse community in major projects. The fourth one is particularly about the leaders, significant improvement in the diversity of leadership, where there is clearly particularly challenges, and then trying to assess and set some targets for our organisations, for the association in its activities. So we actually look at ourselves at the MPA, our events, as well as looking at the wider community, because if we're not sort of showing the MPAs doing it, it's awkward to be in the position of trying to develop this across the community. So we obviously ought to try and make sure we're doing all the right things in the MPA itself. So the objective of this is, we're hoping you'll all feel these are things you want to be part of and help us work on going forward, and take into your own organisations, but also be part of how we can sort of, as I say, shift the industry. I think what we want to talk about the rest of the time we've got today is how we actually do that and take that forward. To which,
Perfect.
Manon, I think you're going to pick up
again. That's great. Yep, back to me. We're doing a good I don't know, baton passing, David. Very good.
Well, I think we estimated 20 minutes to here, so we're doing okay.
We did. We're doing very well for timing. So many of you will know that I've been sort of, as Lisa mentioned, trying to move the dial on diversity within major projects for many years. And the reason that we're just getting around to setting up diversity champions now is for 2 reasons. One is because the board has recognised it as a strategic objective, and 2, because we've had a really good example of how this can work with one of our other strategic objectives about improving sustainability within major projects. So the Sustainability Ambassadors Network has been running for a couple of years. We actually set it up during COVID, which was quite amazing to do that, and it's really active, and it's making a big difference, sharing best practice and doing exactly what we do really well at MPA, which is bringing together all those different sectors and points of view from across the major projects sectors, and sharing them across. So that's what we're trying to do with this group, is to spread the load a little bit, so it's not all on my shoulders. Ideally, we will meet quite frequently, certainly in the early days, so that we don't lose momentum. We want to make sure that we're having conversations on the things that value most to us and to our member organisations. What myself and Ali will do is help to set up any online conversations and events, and face-to-face ones if that's needed. And we're going to try and create a space for knowledge sharing on our website. And if I just jump ahead. So that's what we're going to try and do for you. What we'd like you to do for us is really be passionate about this. So let people know what you're doing in your organisation. So spread the word, share all of your insights. So I said to somebody earlier today, it's the good, the bad and the ugly. So what's worked, what hasn't worked, what was disastrous, to help other people avoid doing those. Take part in those initiatives that together we agree have made a real difference, and support everyone else within this group, so that we're answering each other's questions and providing that best practice input on all of the topics that are related to equality, diversity and inclusion. Now, what we'd like you to do, I talked earlier about the sustainability ambassadors, and we gave them some specific things to look at, and they set off different little breakout groups, and have done some really fantastic work. What we know from the objectives that David has shared is that there's two things we definitely want to look at. One of them is creating events based around good practice, best practice, some real case study stuff, some stories from the coalface, as it were, and share those. We've got some dates in March next year. We want to have an actual face-to-face event, and then some other perhaps virtual activities around that. And we also want to create a knowledge sharing platform based on our MPA website. But there are other things that may come up. And the other ideas that were listed on this slide are things that the sustainability ambassadors, similar things to what the sustainability ambassadors are doing. So they identified some personal and some business pledges that were particularly appropriate for the major project space, which we've encouraged people to sign up to. They developed a sustainability toolkit. So it's quite complicated, so I won't even try and show it to you, but a place that lists all the different resources that are available to help people to improve sustainability at all sorts of different points within the life cycle of a project. So, for example, we may think that that would be part of the knowledge sharing platform and the sharing best practice. And I'm sure that you will have some other fantastic ideas as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to see if I can get you to feedback. Hopefully you remembered to nominate somebody. We'll get a bit of feedback from your discussions. Bear in mind, you didn't have a great deal of time. This is really just to whet your appetite. And I'm chairing this little bit because David's got a very important task. He's got to disappear. So he's just going to disappear quietly when he needs to go. So he'll listen to what he can. So it looks like we're all back in the room. And I'm going to start with one of the knowledge sharing groups. So have we got knowledge sharing group A? I think they were called A and B, weren't they, Ali?
Yep.
Yeah. So if we got somebody that was in knowledge sharing group A that would like to share their knowledge or their thoughts about how we can manage information.
We didn't agree who was going to speak. So if anybody wants to speak, happy that you speak, or I'm happy to speak. I don't mind.
Go ahead, Vicky. I scribbled some notes, but please, you go ahead,
So
and I'll chip in.
Please,
Yeah.
if I've missed anything. So
yeah, sure.
we had a really good discussion. I believe 7 of us, and the point was made that in terms of the knowledge share, we should perhaps, because there was information that can be gathered from other sources outside of the MPA. So maybe as a starting point, defining what we're dealing with in terms of diversity. So really, what are we dealing with? And not necessarily what are we excluding, but what are we dealing with? And then maybe looking at putting together a scope and creating and what the format looks like for sharing information. The point was also made about on major, so we're looking at major projects, is you're looking at on a major project, there would be more than one organisation, perhaps. So in terms of each organisation having their own policy on diversity, how do you take the best practice and combine that to create something that works for the wider project team on that major project? So those are the points I've got. Janet, I don't know if I've missed anything. If you want to add anything else.
Yeah, no, they are the major points. The one thing we also talked about is there's the complexity. So when you're on a major project, Georgia mentioned that on the project she's on, there's about 1,300 or between 1,100 and 1,300 people from 3 different organisations. There's always a complexity of implementation. So when we're looking at diversity initiatives, when you look at those, often have to go across multiple organisations. So it's about how that complexity of implementation is taken into consideration in how we share best practice, etc.
That's great. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Janet.
Yeah.
So whilst we're on the knowledge sharing thing, there was another group talking about that. Does anybody from the other group want to add to those thoughts? Did you have a different perspective? Did we have anybody in the other group, Ellie?
Yeah, should have been.
Well, I think it just demonstrates you've been very comprehensive in Group A. Well done. So the other two groups were talking about events and topics and speakers and so on and so forth. So let's go backwards. Let's find Group B that was talking about events and see if they've got a spokesperson from that group. Just share some of the thoughts. Were there any Group
I'm not
Bs?
sure. I'm not sure if we were Group Kelly, were we A or B? I'm not sure. But we can share some of
We've
our
got some
insight.
points, we just don't know what we were.
Yeah, we've got some points.
Anybody in an events group would like to share your ideas?
I can share some thoughts, and then Katrina and Kelly, maybe you can add to them as well. So I think, Manon, one of the main things we were talking about is seeing how we can get clear on the sort of objective of this group in light of that, event. So seeing it as a potential launch to this group and the impact we'd like to make within the MPA, because I think this is what really is a cutting edge for this group, that, we represent different organizations within the MPA and can understand a bit of the challenges that we might have, and maybe use that as a theme to differentiate this event from other diversity and inclusion events. We also spoke a bit about the lens of inclusion and how that would include a wider audience rather than diversity, which sometimes might limit some of the audiences. And I think these are the key points I've captured. Katrina, I don't know if you have anything further to add from our discussion.
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of questions we asked in our group, not necessarily getting to answers, but one of the questions was what do we mean by the diversity and inclusion? Is it protected characteristics? Is it about wider thought processes, wider backgrounds? We felt it was important to not narrow down the audience, but to when we send out the invites, to make sure people know what the topic is and what we're dealing with. And then a question we kept coming back to is, what's the objective of this group? Because obviously what we want to do is achieve against this objective. So what's the objective? Your point there, Amal, on problems, but also the need to focus the event. Probably it's such a wide topic that we probably need to focus. So we might need to put a signpost as a launch to the different areas that we want to cover, but we should just focus on one main topic for the event. And then I think the other bit that we started to touch on, which was more a question, was how do we make sure that we don't just get people that are passionate about diversity, inclusion and equality, but that we get the wider audience, and that we don't feel that we are how do we deal with those people that just don't want to engage with this topic, or actually feel that it's a taboo subject that they don't really like? And we started to discuss that, but I don't think we necessarily got to any answers.
That's brilliant. Definitely quite often we preach to the converted, don't we? And we just go round and round in circles with that. That's fabulous. Were there other people that also talked about events that want to chip in, add to what Amal and Katrina have just said? No, very quiet. Once again, very well done for being. Oh,
no,
is that somebody speaking up?
The only reason why we're quiet is because Amal and Katrina captured extremely well what we've said as a team. So there's nothing else to add. So thank you both for that.
Brilliant. Well done. Thanks for that vote of confidence. Fantastic. So I've scribbled down lots of thoughts, and as I say, this isn't not the only opportunity for you to have these discussions. This was really just a taster for you to start breaking open what those questions look like, and helping us to understand the complexities. We're not going to be putting on an event till March, so we've got plenty of time to organise it. And think of the best speakers and the best way of approaching it, and so on and so forth. And similarly, we need to get the knowledge. We need to be really clear about how we're going to capture the knowledge in order that we can create that framework so that it's useful. So look, we've got just 10 minutes left of our allotted time. What I wanted to do was just give you an opportunity to chip in with any other thoughts. I know you've a couple of you have already talked about what are the objectives for this group. And if there's any other questions or points that you want to raise, to make sure that I hear them, and Belinda and Janet are still here as well as members of the Task and Finish group that can hear those as well, and then we'll feed that back. So a few minutes over to you really for whatever you would like to ask or get clarification on. I'd suggest that you put your hand up in or do something so I can see, because there's quite a few of you without cameras on that I can't see. Lovely. Christy.
Hello. Yes. So one thing that in my opinion, I think we can benefit from improving on the next session is better defining the tasks and the output required. Because at the first one, I felt we were a bit vague with the task and didn't quite get the answers probably that we were after, you know.
Yeah, deliberately vague, Christy, I think.
Deliberately vague.
Deliberately vague to just get you all thinking. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very wide point, but thanks for that. I mean, you're
Okay.
right. We should be much more specific. Kelly.
Thanks, Manon. I think this is just a question that I have, and it might not be one that you've got an answer to. When this kind of concept came together about having this champions network, is the intention that this is focused on diversity and inclusion for people working on projects, but in major projects teams, or is it about, or probably not instead of, but in addition, is it also about thinking about the impact on your end users of your projects, including those people, thinking about, if you have great diversity and really good inclusive design, how incredible that impact can be for society, or for the people who are going to end up using, when your project's no longer a project and it's business as usual, because that's something that we focus a lot on in our diversity and inclusion strategy in the civil service for project delivery. We have a whole kind of pillar of work that's about embedding inclusion into projects so that there's inclusive outcomes at the end. So it's great to focus on the people working in projects, and you're way more likely to have inclusive outcomes at the end if you actually have diverse project teams. But there's also the ways of delivering work, the way you design your project, how you do equality impact assessments, when you do them, barriers to inclusion, etc. So is it all of the above, or is it focusing more on one, or do we just not know yet?
So I think I would say at the moment it's primarily the former rather than the latter, without necessarily excluding the latter. So if we'll share the slides with you so that you can see them, but if you recall the slide that David spoke to about the objectives that have been set by our board, it's very much about trying to create greater diversity within major projects delivery teams, particularly within major projects leadership. But having said that, that's definitely a really good question that we can take back to the task and finish group and set as a challenge, and set as a challenge to this group. How do we do both of those things? So thanks, Kelly. Now we've got 3 more hands up: Jeanette, Arvinda and Georgia. So let's take them in that order, if that's okay.
Yeah, hi. It was just a quick question in terms of what you envisage the next step or steps to be after today's meeting. I'm just conscious, Mark, sounds like it's a long way away. I've been in that position myself, putting on a big event, and I know your invites have to go out sort of January time, and then you need to be talking about what it is you're doing prior to that. So it's probably the time will become quite intense, I think, over the next 2 or 3 months. So I was just wondering what thought he'd given in terms of the structure going forwards.
Definitely right, Jeanette. So I did say March is a long way away, but as MPA are constantly delivering events, so we do know events take a long time to pull together. But so I want to get, what I would like to do is to reconvene this group again quite soon, and Ali and I will liaise about dates, and all those who are really passionate about helping to pull together an event, we might set up a separate subgroup and really start that process, because you're absolutely right, it takes a really long time to make these things happen. And we will have a date fairly soon. We're just trying to pin David down to chair it. So there will be next steps in terms of dates. Ali and David and I are going to have to go back to the diary and pull out some dates, and we'll send you some invitations. Don't worry too much if everybody can't make every meeting. We're a big group, and I think what will happen is some people can, some people can't. Teams has told me we've only got 5 minutes left. So Arvinda, would you like to ask your question, make your point?
Yeah, mine was a very quick question, actually. It was just whether if anybody wanted to express an interest in becoming a diversity champion that's not already here, is that still possible?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you. Georgia.
Hi. I was just gonna mention, like, I probably maybe forgot that the point of it was about leadership. And that's kind of where the diversity element is the focus. I think in terms of like best practice and knowledge sharing, etc., I don't think the construction industry is very much, or not construction, but major projects probably isn't a great example of diverse leadership. And I guess it's just the process of thinking outside of traditional I guess industries and looking at maybe different industries to kind of support that. But I think the whole leadership pipeline thing is a huge topic. It's a lot in there. Succession planning has always been something that I've been conscious of, and who decides who's a future leader, what's the process in deciding who's future leader, how do you recognize talent, and who's the judge of it. So I think that's something that maybe we can talk about in the next session, because I think succession planning and pipelines are very key to changing the narrative of what diversity and leadership looks like.
Absolutely, Georgia. And I really love your point about learning from other industries, because we're not necessarily the best in this sector, and that is something that we try to do a lot within the major project sector. So, for example, the next event that we've got coming up is about what you can learn from the pharmaceutical industry, who aren't what you'd expect to be, not in a D&I sense, but in a terms of a project delivery sense. So we're always constantly striving to get people who can talk from a different perspective. I think we learn well on that, and absolutely about leadership. And particularly the project leadership. So sometimes what we notice is that within our member organisations, looking at them as organisations as a whole, they do seem to have some diversity, some difference on their senior leadership teams, but that doesn't necessarily reflect back in their major project delivery teams. And we very much want that to be the focus. So this is about the projects, not necessarily the organisations.